wasn't until midnight when we found out the police were involved, because it is a potential criminal offense, that the candidate stepped aside himself.
This guy could be charged. He could be charged and convicted with this crime.
After days of mounting pressure about his indefensible comments advocating his conservative opponent be kidnapped and trafficked to Beijing, Paul Chiang is officially out of the federal election. No, Mark Carney didn't fire him. He resigned. And he did that conveniently right after the RCMP stated they had launched an investigation into his remarks.
Let's take a look.
Now says he will not be running for re-election. He is dropping out after the backlash to comments he made about a former conservative rival suggesting he be turned into the Chinese consulate to collect a bounty.
You can say you have a vetting process, but saying it doesn't mean you have a good one. What goes behind that? What goes into that?
Chiang made the comment in a Chinese language newspaper in January. He has since apologized to Conservative candidate Joe Tay. In a statement released late last night, Chiang says this, quote, "I do not want there to be distractions in this critical moment. That's why I'm standing aside as our 2025 candidate in our community of Markham Unionville." Before Chiang's decision to step aside, Liberal leader Mark Carney said he would not be dropping him as a candidate, even though he called Chiang's comment, quote, "deeply offensive."
This is a very interesting
Turn of events.
We expected Chiang to eventually be out of the federal election, but this actually makes Carney look pretty bad.
Worse even than if he had done it himself.
Yeah, because you have the Liberal Party looking at this the entire weekend. You had them on Sunday strategizing how they were going to respond to this and what they were going to do. And then Carney comes out and says, we're going to keep him because he's a person with high integrity. Then there were calls by organizations around Canada and even some around the world asking the RCMP to actually look into this. The RCMP then reportedly did say that they were going to be looking into this. And then Paul Chiang resigns.
Well, and it's interesting when he resigned, which was after the midnight cutoff for most newspapers. So he resigned very late last night, meaning between Monday evening and Tuesday morning. And again, it was after that midnight cutoff for print for most newspapers so that it wouldn't be front page news.
Now, it would be nice if we could claim that the reason he resigned was because of the amount of pressure he received because of Has Carney Fired Paul Chiang.ca that we set up yesterday, but, you know, pretty sure it wasn't that.
No, dear, sorry.
No. But anyhow, it at least tells the story of what has gone on here. And the fact that Paul Chiang seemed to have more wherewithal to exercise the discretion to resign than the Liberal leader Mark Carney. Give me a break.
Well, and this looks horrible for Mark Carney. It really shows how inexperienced he is in politics, because the first thing that he should have done upon hearing about this is gotten rid of Chiang.
Right. And this would have been bad, but it would not have been bad necessarily for the Liberals per se.
Or Carney. It would have been focused exclusively on Chiang, what he said, what he did, and now he's gone from the party. But that's not the route that the Liberals chose to take. They chose to defend it, and Carney defended it, which
Right.
looks awful.
Now, let's take a look at what Pierre Poilievre said this morning.
Just yesterday, we saw those conflicts play out when he refused to remove Paul Chiang, a Liberal candidate who had said that a Canadian Conservative candidate should be turned over on a bounty to the Chinese government that wants to imprison or possibly even kill him because he is a political dissident. Mr. Carney said that Mr. Chiang could stay on as a candidate. It wasn't until midnight when we found out the police were involved, because it is a potential criminal offense, that the candidate stepped aside himself, not being pushed out by Carney, but because he decided on his own. Mr. Carney will never put our country first. He will always put himself first.
this is all that can be said. It wasn't until a police investigation was being launched that they said, uh-oh, time to go.
But it wasn't even the party leader that acted. It wasn't anybody in the upper echelons of the party either. It was Paul Chiang himself who said, maybe I should step down. Maybe I should step down to save the party, the embarrassment perhaps. But he took it upon himself instead of the leader or, again, the upper echelons of the party showing leadership and saying, you need to go right now.
Well, and in some cases, right, in some cases, when somebody resigns, they don't actually resign. They are ushered into a back room or a phone call, and they have a quiet conversation, say, okay, you're done, but we're going to offer you the dignity of a resignation so that you can leave quietly on your own terms. That almost certainly did not happen
right.
in this remark, because it
looks worse for Carney, and it looks worse for the party that Paul Chiang resigned instead of them kicking him out.
There was no good way out of this after
No.
Carney said he supported him.
No,
even
not
if
at all.
even if later in the day Mark Carney said, well, I changed my mind and he's out. Well, then that just looks like you capitulated, and the only reason that you did that was either A, because of the RCMP investigation, or because of the pressure from the other opposition parties, and you look weak.
Right. This decision should have been made swiftly, and they should have removed him immediately upon hearing this, and they didn't. And now this looks bad. It looks like we have a leader of the Liberal Party who is afraid to lead, especially when the PRC may be involved.
Right, and that he's afraid of Beijing. So let's get to this, this bit about the RCMP. RCMP probing comments from Liberal Paul Chiang about Chinese bounty placed on conservatives. So let's just, skip the article. What are they possibly going to be looking at in terms of Paul Chiang? Well, one charge that they could be actually looking at is section 279.1 of the criminal code, which is trafficking in persons. So he was essentially advising or counseling people to abduct Joe Tay in order to actually have him trafficked back to Beijing, and then who knows what would have happened at that point. Here's another example. Section 22 of the criminal code, counseling an offense, where a person counsels another person to be a party to an offense, and that other person is afterwards a party to that offense. The person who counseled is a party to that offense, notwithstanding that the offense was committed in a way different from that which was counseled. And these are only two. We are not legal experts. There could be others that they could pick from this. But the point is that this was not printed as a joke when it came to that Chinese newspaper. It was printed just, this is something that he said. And what he said was, can someone please go and kidnap this guy, bring him to the Chinese consulate, and redeem your bounty of $184,000 Canadian. That's what he did. So A, this is good that the RCMP are actually looking into this, and this guy could be charged. He could be charged and convicted with this crime, and that is then a stain and linked on the Liberal Party.
Well, and you know what? Good, because somebody who's joking about having like Chinese style, policing, I suppose, brought into Canada against Canadian citizens, like somebody like that should not be running for office. Somebody like that should not be representing our democracy when they clearly don't have respect for it.
Right. And here's another example that actually just broke today of a conservative saying something really dumb, but the Conservatives reacted very different. Conservative candidate booted after CTV News uncovers audio of him joking Trudeau should receive death penalty.
A Conservative candidate who voiced his support for quote-unquote public hangings, even joking that former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau should receive the death penalty, will no longer be running to represent the party after CTV News first obtained audio of his comments. Quote, the comments are clearly unacceptable. Mr. McKenzie will not be the Conservative candidate, end quote, a Conservative campaign spokesperson told CTV News in a statement on Tuesday morning. Mark McKenzie, who sits as a city councillor in Windsor, Ontario, was running to represent the riding of Windsor-Tecumseh Lakeshore. In 2022, he made remarks in a now defunct comedy podcast called, quote, Mark and Chris Podcast, end quote. Content from the podcast has since largely been wiped online. The episode was released on February 18th, 2022, at the end of the quote-unquote Freedom Convoy that took over downtown Ottawa for 3 weeks amid political division over pandemic restrictions and mandates. During the episode, McKenzie, who called Trudeau a quote-unquote idiot amid the aftermath of the protests, spoke to his co-host about the need to, quote, hold your politicians accountable, end quote, and for, quote, more regular people, end quote, to run for office. When his co-host expressed doubt over the impact that local city councillors can have on issues like lockdowns, McKenzie pushed back and said, quote, we all need to band together, end quote. He then spoke about the need to return to medieval-era methods as a way to invoke change, going on to say, quote, I'm also in favor of public hangings, so I think we need to bring that back, end quote. Quote, I think they should bring back the electric chair as well, but again, only if you're like 1,000,000% positive. Like, no, but you know what I mean, end quote, McKenzie added. While going back and forth with his co-host about his support for the death penalty, McKenzie went on to give examples of cases where it should be applied and included Trudeau's name.
Now, notice how quickly CTV News ran with this story.
Oh, of course.
But
I think they don't realize that it really paints the Conservative Party in a good light, because as soon as they found out, they're like, okay, he's gone. We're not going to put up with that. We're not going to support that. That's deplorable.
Well, and we actually found a clip of the exact same reporter that was really aggressive with Mark Carney yesterday from CTV, and they posted this online for her 30-second commentary on this. Take a look.
And also, it contrasts with what is happening, Marcia, on our breaking news site right now. A Conservative candidate has been removed from the race. He's from Windsor, and the reason why he's been removed is because we have audio of him talking about his support for public hangings. The Conservatives acted to remove him right away when this surfaced. So what is the delay? Why is the delay? Why did Mr. Carney choose to do so? So those will be the contrasting questions that will occur later today.
So this is actually
good,
a win for the Conservatives, because their swift action on this runs directly contrast to Mark Carney's inaction on this. And everyone can actually tell that this guy was joking because of the way his remarks were actually given on the podcast versus something in print where there is no context for that.
Still, though, it's unacceptable, and the Conservative Party sees that it's unacceptable, and they got rid of him right away.
Right. They can't have a guy joking about that.
And for those of you in that riding of Windsor-Tecumseh Lakeshore, you almost certainly will be getting a new Conservative candidate. They will be appointing one because they have until April the 7th to submit one.
But this is interesting because the reporter says, look, here's this other example where this guy said this for the Conservatives. They acted immediately. He's gone. And the story comes right back to Mark Carney. And this is why we said if Mark Carney had booted this guy out immediately, all the oxygen of this story would have been gone. Just like immediately all the oxygen of this Conservative story is gone, and the fire goes right back to Mark Carney because he's demonstrated that he wasn't willing to do what the Conservatives did, which was act swiftly, show leadership, and demonstrate that, you know what, there are certain standards that our politicians are held to, certain standards that our Conservative politicians are held to, and we're going to be consistent about that right across the board.
Well, and that's exactly it. This shows that the Conservative Party is up to the task of leading, whereas the Liberal Party sits on its hands.